Welcome to Energy Frontier, the Wyoming Landscape Podcast. Hosted by Dr. Holly Krutka, Executive Director of the School of Energy Resources at the University of Wyoming. The show highlights SER's role supporting our mission to promote energy-driven economic development for the state of Wyoming.
Welcome, Mr. Bell. Let's start by having you tell our listeners about your background, how you came to work at the Office of Economic Transformation, and your role here.
Great. Thanks, Holly. So I've been a business owner in Campbell County for about 20 years, actually about 24 years. Born and raised in Campbell County. Got to see Campbell County growing up, what it looked like 40, 50 years ago, and now what it looks like now, be part of that as a student, and then moving away and going to college and coming back and starting my own business, which I have expanded, and I'm a little bit of everything kind of businesses. So I started out running a welding shop, and my degree's in biology, so I've not used that.
Wow.
But, yeah, right. So it's kind of
direct
crazy,
line there.
Yeah, and then I a hobby of taxidermy turned into a taxidermy business, but really where I started to give back to the community and talk about this kind of stuff that we're going to talk about today is I ran for county commissioner in 2014 and was elected and served 2 terms as county commissioner in Campbell County in some really interesting times, some really highs and some really lows over 8 years. And how I ended up in this position really was I decided that I would run for the House instead of my 3rd term for commissioner, and I was unsuccessful. And sometimes things happen for a reason that you don't understand. And it just so happened that this position was coming up, and one of my focuses as a commissioner was economic development and where are we going to go, and having a future, having some foresight in what's going to happen in Campbell County. And we can talk about Pronghorn Industrial Park or the Wyoming Innovation Center that I was really part of from the very beginning. And so that's kind of where it happened. Just some things just fell together by losing an election, and then ended up putting my name in for this and was accepted by the advisory board to be this director of this office.
It's funny how that happens.
It is, and hard to understand sometimes.
Yep. So the Office of Economic Transformation's mission is to support the future of northeastern Wyoming while supporting economic recovery, diversity, and resilience. So why was this office stood up, and how is it funded?
Sure. That's a great question. It's something that everybody wants to know. The EDA is actually what funds this office.
Which stands for?
Economic Development Association.
And it's a federal organization.
It's a federal agency. And Gillette College Foundation actually put in for the grant. And they had put in for the grant in middle 2022. It was accepted in September, I think, 2022. They put this up, and the idea is that maybe we were missing out on a collective, and we'll talk about it a little bit more, but there's been a lot of economic development strategies and plans across the state. We've been talking about this resiliency and diversification for not only decades, but maybe a century. And so in Wyoming. And so the college thought that maybe we needed somebody to maybe consolidate some of this and look at it. And so they were successful in their grant application. And so that's how it's funded. And I think we'll get into a little bit more about maybe some of the details about what we're doing.
Sure. And I have to say, we're zero surprised at the School of Energy Resources at the proactive nature of Gillette College. They're great partners. We work with them on a number of programs, and they have great leadership. So I'm not surprised that they had this vision.
For sure. I think we've had, Gillette College being a partner of Northern Wyoming Community College District for 50 plus years, and then deciding to chart its own path. Now we've had a campus here. We've had things that we've worked with industry, and we've just found a way to work things out, and it doesn't surprise me that they did this either.
So when should individuals engage with the Office of Economic Transformation, and how's the best way to do that?
So I think the best way is, and I would say as far as economic development goes, I think any time is a good time. Mm-hmm. Like if you have questions about really anything, because we really have 3 pillars that we're working on in our strategic plan, one of them is being an information hub. And so if you're not sure who to talk to, you're not sure where to go, this is a perfect place to do that. Best way to do that is to email me, rusty.bell@transformgillette.net. Now, I didn't pick that. That was picked prior to me coming on. But anyway, that I think it's telling. I mean, I think there's some things in that. But rusty.bell@transformgillette.net, or you can always call me. I have an office. Actually, it's a cell phone, but it's for the office, 307-306-8606. No questions silly. I really truly believe that. I mean, we've dealt with everything from housing to somebody has a question about hydrogen, and we just try to find the best answer for that, get them pointed in the right direction, and then help where we can help.
It seems like there are a lot of different definitions for economic development, and really what you're trying to do is seize opportunities here and kind of identify some of the barriers to opportunities. Is that, I mean, how would you describe?
Yeah, I think so. I think one of the things in getting into comprehensive diversification and implementation plan that we actually developed over the past year and a half through a consultant that we hired, which was part of the grant that was planned. But really what we did is we tried not to go out and do all of the same research that everybody's done. What we did is we went back to the 2010 to 2013 and all the way to now, and looking at all those different strategic plans that have been done across the state, from Endow to others, but also especially in northeastern Wyoming, and tried to pull out and look at and the economic numbers and workforce numbers over those same times. What has worked? What haven't we done? Where are the gaps? And then come up with a strategic plan that can be implemented from that. And what we came up with was, number one is a resource hub, like an information hub was one of them that I think that people struggle with. They just weren't sure where should they go to the Chamber of Commerce, should they go to economic development, should they go to the college? Well, maybe just come one place and we'll point you in the right direction. And I think that was the first thing. The second thing and one of the things that was identified in every single plan was an entrepreneurial ecosystem, like to create your own. And we have an incubator at economic development, but an entrepreneurial ecosystem is more than a space. It's helping young businesses and startup businesses get to the next level, helping them find an accountant, find somebody that might be able to invest in them, find a place. There's more to it than that. And so that's something that we have somebody hired to do that here now. Dana Miller is part of this office, and she's the entrepreneurial ecosystem coordinator. So she is really working on that. And so building your own. And then the other gap that we have and that we haven't seen a lot of in northeastern Wyoming is that outside investment. Yeah. And that is what I call it private-public partnership, that we don't have this unlimited amount of money in this office to give for matching funds or anything like that. So what we're doing is, and where I live in the space the most, is going out there and looking at and for outside investment, people that want to invest in things that we have here. And the things that we have here are infrastructure. I know we'll talk about that a little bit more, but we have a lot of assets in Campbell County in northeastern Wyoming that aren't being utilized as much as they used to be. And we're producing half as much coal as we were 15 years ago. So, whether it's power or rail or property or other things, we should be using those and considering those assets and looking for ways to save those into the future.
So a recent RFP issued by your office focused on creating a comprehensive diversification and implementation plan. And that RFP included a long list of numerous past and existing diversification efforts in northeastern Wyoming, which you were just referring to. And some of those dated back in this reference to 2013, although maybe, at least for Wyoming, it's gone maybe a century past that.
Yeah.
So how challenging is it for your office to coordinate those efforts and make sure everyone's on the same page?
It hasn't been challenging, and I think it hasn't been because there's really a focus in our area right now, and I think that there's some realism that everybody's saying. And so, whether it's the city or the county governments, or whether it's economic development, whether it's the chamber, whether it's visitor center, I think everybody knows, and we kind of see this, we certainly see the information coming down from the national level, that the market is going away from thermal coal. And we see it. We were, like I said, we were producing 460 million tons 15 years ago,
Yeah.
12 to 15 years ago, and now we're down to
just in Wyoming.
Yeah, just in Wyoming. That's right. So, and still we're producing 230 million tons, which is most of what the United States. It's not quite half, but it's close. And so we can see what's happening, and I think being very proactive, it's really easy to get stakeholders to the table to talk about it. And so when we came up with our initial draft plan, it wasn't hard to get meetings with all of the stakeholders to sit down and say, this is what we've come up with, this is where we want to go. It's simple, and some of the things that you see fit into these different bubbles, and I think that we can work this. So we took their advice, worked in some different things for them, and put this together. But it really hasn't been hard to get everybody on the same page, because I think everybody wants to be proactive. Everybody wants to get ahead of this. We can also look at examples in West Virginia and Kentucky and the Ohio River Valley of people that or didn't have time to be proactive and
resources.
That's right. That's right. And I think one of the other things that is very evident is that we are different than most coal reliant areas. And I say that because we ship coal to 25 other states. We're still producing over 200 million tons. We also have other minerals that actually give us a little bit of flexibility, and maybe not flexibility, but actually
just different opportunities.
Yeah, we're kind of diversified in different minerals in a sense, and it's actually helped. And so we're not just one power plant and one mine, and when that power plant is ready to be decommissioned, so is the mine. And
right.
So we're different, and while we're reliant on 25 other states on that production, we also have our own power plants, and so in a sense we're diversified in thermal coal, but we're diversified across the country. So we have an opportunity to see that coming, kind of set those dates, but work in a proactive manner to help alleviate some of this.
Yeah. So Gillette specifically, in the entire region as well, has seen rough economic times in the past few years with coal production declining. But despite this, you constantly have a really positive message of hope, and it is based on being proactive. So tell our listeners how you get up every day and spread optimism about future prospects for the area.
Great question. First of all, I'm a positive person.
Yeah.
And I think I really think it's contagious.
Yep.
I also think negativity is contagious. And so when you go out there and you talk to people and you're excited about the things that are happening, and you can tell them, hey, there are things happening. There are people that are interested in our area. We are still producing. Oil and gas is doing really well. We have uranium prices right now that are crazy, and they're ramping up. And when you can go out there and say, hey, do you remember 2016? And I remember it vividly. I remember March 31st, 2016, when 600 people were laid off on one day, and we lose 1,000 jobs in 3 months. I was the commissioner. I was the chairman. It was not fun. And so when you deal with that and you lose 4,000 to 5,000 people in a very short amount of time, and then you look back now in this position and you look at those numbers and you say, guess what? We've made that up. And we're only producing half as much coal.
Right.
I mean, there's some positivity there. The other thing that I show people is the numbers. And like for 2 years now, we've had less than 100 houses on the market. Sometimes we have less than 60 houses on the market.
I was going to bring that up. Yeah. Gillette is resilient.
It's crazy. And we have an incredibly beautiful community that we have created. And oil and gas and coal revenues have helped create that. I don't know how you can not be positive about the community you live in a job that you get up and look for ways to continue to keep the community in a place that it is. I mean, we want to continue to be the nation's energy producer. It probably will change what kind of energy it is, but we want to continue to do that. And I think it really comes down to the people. The people here are resilient, more resilient than I've ever seen.
Yeah.
And they're hardworking, and that's what does it for me. Plus, I love the community. I bleed Campbell County. I really do. I'm born and raised here. So for me, it's that. It really is. So.
And I will also add some of the activities that have been happening in the economic development sphere in Campbell County are so beneficial to us at the School of Energy Resources as we focus on supporting the coal industry here. So, I think it is about diversification, but even within that, we're looking at all kinds of opportunities for coal.
Absolutely. And I look forward to talking about that a little bit more.
And oil and gas as well.
For sure.
So one of the aspects of your work that you've been really excited about is the incredible infrastructure, which you've already mentioned a couple times, around Gillette and Campbell County. I think some of the infrastructure here probably can't be rivaled anywhere else in the United States. So can you talk about how you're looking at that infrastructure to help support building out emerging and new industries?
Sure, yes. So when we talk about infrastructure, really what we're talking about is a couple things. Not only is there community-wide infrastructure, but really what I talk about is that industrial infrastructure, right. and that rail that we have through the whole county, both serviced by BNSF and UP. We have 12 to 15 rail loop sites at mines. All of those sites have really good industrial water capabilities. They have incredible power capabilities. They also have a lot of facilities like buildings and different things that may or may not be being used as much as they used to be. And so I think one of the things that we've done is work with those companies on the ground and said, hey, how can we help you attract, and are you willing to have us help you attract maybe somebody that wants to use your whatever infrastructure? I mean, there might be some existing gas infrastructure that actually helps somebody, a new emerging green gas company or something like that. And so, it could be property. There's 250,000 acres, I think, of reclaimed mine land just in Campbell County. Yep. And so there's things out there through incentives through the IRA and different things that help those companies or give incentives to those companies to say, hey, maybe we should look at the infrastructure that Campbell County has. And so that's really what we have done. We were successful in helping Arch Coal rezone the Coal Creek mine site. So they've actually rezoned that through county zoning. It doesn't mean that site, 1,450 acres with all that infrastructure in there, is actually saved right now, but it's a huge first step. And the next step is coming hopefully this summer.
So when you say rezone?
Yeah, so right now most, and I think all but one or two of the older coal infrastructure is not zoned. So it's not zoned and they're under reclamation reclamation plans.
So this would save it from being reclaimed? Okay.
And this is one step in that process.
Okay,
and so really what we are working on with those individual sites in Fort Union, where the pilot plant's going to be, is a perfect example of how to do that. But what we're actually doing is a little bit different in a sense, because we're working on an actual co-use area. So we want Arch Coal to continue to mine that coal. There's still a market for it. We want them to produce that coal, but we also want to use part of that facility for other things. Yeah. And so actually going in there and saying, hey, we have a developer that's interested in using this for some other things. Let's work with them. Let's draw a line on where's that post-mining land use different than what it is now. And let's continue to mine coal. Let's continue to process it or transport it out of this industrial area while we're also doing some other things in there. So we're really close on that. A lot of articles went out on that, and we've had a lot of interest in that area. And as I think, Fort Union's right in there. I think there's a lot of interest in the Fort Union Industrial Park too. So that part of it's really exciting, and it's really just scratching the surface of that infrastructure countywide. And I think, we don't want the companies, and it's the first thing I talk to them about, is we don't want them to think that we're trying to push them away from thermal coal. Right. There's a market there. We want them to produce every ounce of that. We really do. In fact, if we could just wave our wand, we would continue to do this and figure out the engineering on CO2 and all that a different way, and continue to produce reliable energy through coal. But in the meantime, we just want them to produce, and we want to work with them with the infrastructure they have, however they're willing. So,
what early success stories can you share with our listeners?
Yeah, so my office, it's been really interesting because, I'm not going to consider a success story. I just think that the zoning for Coal Creek was one really big one. That took 6, 8, 10 months to get that done. I think that's the first one. I think working with a company to actually acquire that and work with Arch on that site is another one that is in process. I had some housing things that came up. The first 3-4 months was all housing. People wanted to know why they couldn't hire. We had 1,500 jobs on the market here, good jobs, and there's no housing. So even if you could recruit somebody here to come, they didn't have a place to live. So I worked a lot with the city council and even the residents over in a certain area to get a 228 unit apartment complex. They changed the zoning, and I went and helped in that process and helped the messaging in that. And so hopefully that'll be great breaking ground anytime.
Wow.
And then, just having that conversation with the public about the need for housing. I mean, we can't grow our community without housing. There's
Right.
just no way. And it's going to bring some extra traffic. It's going to bring extra people. But our businesses really need that right now. And so, that messaging is not always easy. We're Wyoming, and one thing we hate more than urban sprawl is density, right? So, that was something that came from the Harvard Growth Lab, did some housing things. And we had a housing summit here almost a year ago in June. Had a lot of people, developers, come to the table and really work through that. And what that did is it got the city to the table a lot more. They bumped up their housing study. They actually asked me, can you just send us all the housing issues? And I was like, actually gladly. So anyway, so now all the housing issues go to the city.
Great.
But that was a good one. But I think another success that I've had, and this actually goes back to even when I was a commissioner, and especially in the last year and a half, been able to get out there and be on some panels and talk about Campbell County and the Powder River Basin at places we normally wouldn't. Just Transition Fund, E3G, some talks, climate panels, and actually tell them that this is about a community, this is about somebody that has powered the United States, this is about a place and people as much as it is about coal. And it puts a little bit of a face on us instead of just this dark coal cloud. Coal's had a bad name. It just has, and that's not our fault. It's the marketing. It's been marketing partially. And so, I've been able to be part of that. I get to be part of this Resources for the Future here in about a month. And it's the same thing. We're going to go and tell our story. We do better if we get to tell the story, and then you invite these people out to show them the story. We're a case study, one of 3 case studies in the United States, and they're doing 3 in India from the Swaneti Initiative. I think that those case studies will be very good. It's going to show that we are being proactive. We're not ignoring what's happening in the global markets. We're going to continue to produce power as long as there's a market there, but we're also going to be proactive in what's next, whether it's the technology in CCUS, whether it's technology in hydrogen. It really does go back to what the Governor Gordon's message is that we're going to be part of this energy transition, whatever it is, in an all-of-the-above approach. And so I get the opportunity to go and talk about that and talk about our community and our state at a national level, and that has been a success. I really do believe that. I think that it's garnered some more focus on our area. It also helps you target some private investment. And we have and are in contact with a very long list of private investors and working on how do we get them projects on the ground. And those don't happen overnight. And I wish I could tell you there's 5 projects that we've already inked the deal on. I have found out that those don't happen as fast as I want them to, or anybody else, especially when you bring in to air quality permits and those kind of things.
Yeah.
And so, I think the good thing is that there's only been 1 out of 20 things that we've actually scratched off the list. One that said, yeah, we decided to go somewhere else. The rest of them are still in the queue, and I think that's really, really important, and really happy that that's the case. So.
And what kind of industries are you talking to, or do you think might move into northeastern Wyoming to take advantage of all the strengths and infrastructure in this community?
Sure. So the big ones, and what we can talk about, all the work that UWSCR is doing with coal products,
let's talk about
carbon products, but the ones that make the biggest impact on not only our area but the whole state of Wyoming are ones that use our resource. And so when you talk about carbon products or things out of coal, and that could be gasification, those make the most sense for somebody that's wanting to do added value to a resource. So taking $12, $15 ton coal and making it into a product that you sell by the pound, or you sell other things that come out of it. And so those are ones that are really attractive, but some of the ones that are also attractive are ones that have, and a lot of us have heard of, Cowboy Clean Fuels and some of those folks, Terraform, using existing gas infrastructure to make green gas. And so, those kind of things are out there and hopefully doing well. So we're helping those companies as much as we can.
Sure. Can I just give the background?
Yeah, absolutely.
We haven't ever talked about Cowboy Clean Fuels on this podcast yet, although we certainly need to. So Cowboy Clean Fuels is a University of Wyoming spinoff. It was created by a center supported by the School of Energy Resources, led in the College of Engineering and Physical Sciences by a faculty member, first and foremost, although there's lots of collaborators named. And the idea was exactly what you're talking about for Campbell County. We have, in this case, in Cowboy Clean Fuels case, there's tons of infrastructure for coal bed methane, which billions of dollars of infrastructure, of wells, of pipelines, but coal bed methane wasn't able to compete against fracked gas from particularly the Marcellus Shale and other places. But just this idea of what can we do with this infrastructure, adding innovation and technology, they came up with the idea where they have proposed to inject biomass and essentially create a renewable natural gas. Some of the carbon from the biomass will stay underground, and some also regular natural gas, fossil natural gas will also come up, and they can figure out exactly how much renewable natural gas they're producing. So this really takes advantage of that infrastructure. It supports the ag industry by purchasing an agricultural byproduct. I mean, there's just a win-win-win scenario. So, and they do have private investment now.
They do.
So they're still at the early stage of their development as a company, but it just shows you these ideas that start at UW and that we have the opportunity to support at the School of Energy Resources can really come out to the state and benefit using this infrastructure. And so it's an early example of a technology that's doing exactly what you're trying to do here.
Yeah, certainly. And that's one of the green gas companies. I think we have another one that is looking at this area that's actually making green gas out of direct air capture and splitting water. Mm-hmm. And so, I think that's exciting to see some of that and using that existing infrastructure.
And that takes a lot of energy.
It does.
A lot of energy, which you have.
Probably, so. And we have a lot of energy. I think to make it work good for them and gas, they probably have to find a renewable source, which we have a lot of property. I mean, we do. And there's some incentives out there for putting solar on reclaimed mine lands, and so or renewables on reclaimed mine lands, and it kind of goes back to making partnerships with some folks that sometimes you might not think would be, but the Nature Conservancy is really been a proponent for continuing to use the already disturbed land instead of using new green lands to do some of that stuff. And it really does make sense if we just think about that.
That approach can make sense for a lot of entities.
It really does. And the infrastructure's already there. Right. So it does make sense. But I think there's some other things that are exciting. We talked a little bit about the uranium production, and that's going to increase in Campbell County. But rare earth elements and critical minerals, I think that makes sense for this area. When we talk about parts per million and what's the good things out of that and what's the things that you're going to end up not using, we have some of the largest reclamation sites that could accept the parts that you're not going to use. Mm-hmm. And it makes sense to process, probably makes sense in my mind to process those in a place that you're not going to have to transport it then a long ways to go take that material that you're not using. And we have some things in Wyoming that are exploring those rare earth elements not too far from here. And so I think that makes sense. We also have somebody that's going to be, NETL is going to be doing some research at the Wyoming Innovation Center on coal fly ash. Yep. And so that's exciting. But we've also had some contacts from some data centers. We have excess power here, and we also have a cool climate and property. And some of these industrial water capabilities that we have at some of these infrastructure sites are really good. So there's some of those, even energy storage manufacturing. And then you go back to things that are, this is kind of a homegrown idea too, but L&H and what they're doing, there's already some existing infrastructure out there that may help in the microreactor.
Right. So L&H is a local manufacturing company, very engaged in bringing Wyoming to the forefront of nuclear manufacturing.
Correct. That's right. And then we really haven't even talked about all the CCUS efforts.
We haven't. All that. You wouldn't be surprised. That has been covered a little bit in this podcast.
But there's just a lot of things happening, and we also have a CO2 line that runs through Campbell County that is from I guess it's Exxon owned now, but that infrastructure's there with what we have at the ITC and Dry Fork and all the things that are happening there. We're not that far away in a sense to being able to offer CO2 storage as a service. Right. And so that's kind of exciting. There's not really another place that offers that in the world, maybe somewhere in Norway, but there's a lot of things and there's a lot of reasons for people to invest here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a great economic development opportunity in its own right. We've done studies on that for sure. And that is decades in the making. Yeah. All the regulatory work the state's done, School of Energy Resources, our commercial partners, our communities, the administrative branch of the government, just all up and down the line, lots of hard work. And then DEQ, of course, getting that Class 6 primacy, so they can give the permits, really putting us in a driver's seat in that technology. But today we're here at Gillette College, which obviously has an incredible and very vital role, not only in Gillette, but the whole region. And it's led by someone I'm continuously impressed with, President Janelle Oberlander. And there's also Energy Capital Economic Development, Mayor Lundvall, the Campbell County Commissioners. And you've kind of mentioned on this before, but how do all these groups and more, the city, work with your office and work together to move Gillette and Campbell County and really the region forward?
I'm glad you asked this question, because as a commissioner, when I would travel across the state, and now I still travel across the state a lot, they ask, how do you guys get things done? We don't do it alone. We do, and we are working together. And that's one of the big things that I think is, you're never going to get everybody on the same page on every issue. But ultimately, we do work together and have worked together as a community, not only to build a community over decades, but to keep and stay resilient and get and have things maybe that other places don't have. And economic development is no different on that. I mean, I think we're working very hard with all of these entities and a few others, including the Wyoming Business Council and the Chamber of Commerce and the Visitors Center, to really make sure we're streamlining and we're picking up all the gaps and we're making sure that we are all on the same page. It's maybe not always easy, but we do it. And it's through communication. It's through a want to do it. I think everybody really does believe in the proactiveness that's needed to move our community forward and into the next generation. And when I talk to normal people, they want to make sure that there's a place for their kids to come back and work, because this is a great place to be a young family in Gillette. It's a great place.
Yeah.
I mean, all the things we have here for families and kids, what a great place. We want to make sure there's jobs. And so, I think that's something that we still think about a lot, and it keeps everybody focused, and I think it keeps everybody on the same page that we want to continue to do that. And I think having somebody like Janelle at the helm, and Mayor Lundvall, and of course Jim Ford as a county commissioner, helps a lot. It does take individuals sometimes, and people like that really, it makes it much easier to work together. So,
is there anything you would want folks to know about Gillette and the region that you haven't talked about yet?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is that, I think the expectation is, when you see that some of the bad news coming from an administration or from the federal level that maybe targets coal, is that we're just not doing very well.
Yeah.
And what I want to let people know is that, no, we're here. We're still powering the nation, and we're open for business, and we're open for all kinds of different things, and we're out there working diligently to attract more things, to attract different things. Doesn't mean we don't love and believe in our legacy industries, but we're trying to help them out to connect some dots with expanding maybe what they do. So we're working hard here, and we're, like I said, we're open for business in Campbell County and trying to attract more of it. So
yeah. Don't believe what you read. I will never forget that article that came out. Some reporter came in and visited Gillette, and it was like the coldest day of the year.
Yeah.
And wind was gusting, and they went to like McDonald's, and there was no one there because probably no one wanted to be outside going to McDonald's at that moment, and basically wrote, largest coal community in the country on the decline. In the meantime, you can't even buy a house here. It was just, so silly.
It was pretty silly. You can't always decide what somebody's going to write, and that was unfortunate. I think we've had some really, really good articles
Tons
since
of good
then.
ones, yeah.
That one was...
they were not going to be deterred.
No, they were not going to
by
be deterred.
facts or evidence.
That's
and it
exactly
was cold.
right.
I get it. It probably was pretty dead that day. Okay, let's pivot a little, and I wanted to talk to you just maybe for a second about the Leadership Wyoming program. So both you and I graduated from that program. When I was going through, you were instrumental in welcoming our class to this community. I had spent a lot of time here, but many of my cohort hadn't. So what do you think that program offers, and what motivates you to continue giving back and volunteer your time?
Yeah, no, it's... I love the program. 2018 graduate, and still talk to a lot of my classmates. And of course, when you're alumni, everybody's, you're part of Leadership Wyoming. And I think one of the big things it did for me was, and I had traveled the state a lot, but sometimes you don't get to go and learn about a community and learn about the trona industry, and go down and spend time on the air base in Cheyenne and do some of those things, and see the injection molding in Riverton, and see the difference of the communities, and why not only is Gillette, Campbell County important to the rest of the state, but really the rest of the state is important. We're all important in a different way, and we are all on the same team, and it really, the bond that you have with a class, it's just absolutely amazing. I mean, I think I could text 25 or 30 of my classmates from that year, and they would text me right back. I mean, I just feel like it's really...
And we have a WhatsApp going, so we're like regular communications. I know if anyone in my class sneezes.
Yeah, I just saw Bobby Ralston at the Revenue Committee today, so I see those folks often, and we communicate, and just the class and what it does for the growth and the inspiration. Auditor Racines was in my class and ran for office that year. I think she graduated, and she had a built-in statewide coalition to help her.
She is now
and she's still our auditor, our state auditor.
Our state auditor.
That's right. And so, I think the programs, I think, are great. I think learning about the communities across the state and just being part of that Leadership Wyoming team, it's awesome. I mean, I don't know how else to say it. I really believe in it. I like it. It does continue to motivate me, and it's one of my favorite days is when somebody, I'm going to just say, Mandy calls me or emails me and says, can you talk to the class again this year?
Good.
Absolutely. I love it. I mean, I absolutely love when they're here. I get to talk about our community and things that they might not know about, things that we've just talked about that a lot of people don't know. I think it also motivates people to be positive, and I think Leadership Wyoming in general is a very positive organization.
It also gives you kind of a cohort to help you give back to, so you don't ever feel helpless. And I would say you shouldn't do it if you don't want to give back in some way, because that is definitely a expectation of folks who get into that program. So
absolutely.
So last questions. Let's let our listeners learn a little bit more about Rusty Bell. This one is going to be a softball for you. What is your favorite place in Wyoming?
I think it's a softball. I mean, I love Campbell County.
I know you're going to say that. You have to.
But I'm an outdoors person. I also spend a lot of time on a boat, and Lake Solitude in the Bighorns is an absolutely spectacular place. But I've also been able to be on lakes in the evening because I bow fish a lot, and so that means I shoot invasive species like carp from a boat with a bow and arrow. And I do some of that at night. And so I get to see some sunsets on places that maybe people would never see a sunset before, like Pathfinder or Alcova or Seminole or Keyhole, and times that I'm out there are just different. So I get to see some really spectacular Wyoming that some people don't get to see. So, yeah.
And what's one thing you'd like folks to know about you?
Oh gosh, one thing I'd like them to know about me. Well, since I'm wearing the shirt today, and I actually am also a game and fish commissioner in Wyoming, and it's as an honor and a privilege to be able to give back to Wyoming, to be part of that. It's something that the wildlife of Wyoming is unmatched, probably of anywhere in the country, and the organization is absolutely phenomenal. And so happy to be part of that, and yeah. That's something a lot of people don't know about me.
Yeah, so, thank you for doing that. So last thing, this is not obviously on our list, but you also have invested in this community. You brought some really cool stuff to this community. I have to tell you, my favorite thing to do is to go to the place where I believe you're an investor or help develop, that has all in one site a gym, a little coffee shop, restaurant, and a bar with axe throwing.
We do. So,
Thank you so much for building that. I have had so much fun.
It was quite an interesting thing. So I'm one of the 4 owners. There's 2 couples that own it, and my wife and then another couple. It had been closed down for about 9 months, and we had bought an existing place, and we have a 24-hour fitness in there. We have a coffee shop. Did a big remodel during COVID. Great timing. Yeah. And then we have a very nice bar and a liquor store, and then we also have axe throwing in there and in a different part of it. And so it's kind of an all-in-one. We have a very nice patio outside with fireplaces, and it's cozy and it's clean and it's really nice, and I appreciate that. I
am a good customer of yours. If I'm in Gillette, I'm going there.
Oh, so, good. Well, thank you, Holly.
For one thing or another.
Perfect.
So, thank you so much for doing this, Rusty.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Energy Frontier, the Wyoming Landscape, the podcast that highlights the School of Energy Resources at the University of Wyoming. You can expect a new episode of Energy Frontier every Wednesday on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. See you next time.